She wants closeness. He wants quiet. She texts to connect. He disappears to breathe. She aches for reassurance. He mistakes it for control. Two people, same desire, love, but opposite survival instincts. Let's talk about what happens when avoidants fall for anxious lovers. It starts so beautifully. The chemistry is explosive. The avoidant feels safe because the anxious person takes charge, initiates, plans, pursues. The anxious partner feels validated because the avoidant seems calm, capable, grounded. Each thinks they've found balance, but they've actually just met their mirror image in inverted form. The anxious grew up believing love meant earning attention. The avoidant grew up believing love meant losing freedom. So when they meet, the anxious says, "Finally, someone steady." The avoidant says, "Finally, someone who cares." But their nervous systems whisper different stories entirely. The first few weeks, magic. He's attentive, curious, consistent. She feels safe for the first time in forever. Her nervous system purrs, "This is it." And he enjoys her enthusiasm. It's flattering. Her eyes light up when he walks in. Her texts are constant dopamine hits of admiration. It feels nice until the moment it doesn't. The anxious lover begins to crave security faster than he can give it. "Why didn't you reply sooner? Are you still interested?" Her vulnerability becomes pursuit. His calm becomes distance. He finds himself answering a question she's not even asking out loud. "Will you stay?" He doesn't know how to, so he backs away. Not because he doesn't care, but because caring feels like a trap. Avoidants aren't cold by nature. They're survivors. They learned long ago that closeness invites pain. When they needed comfort and found silence, they built fortresses. Now, every time someone reaches out, they see invasion, not intimacy. Meanwhile, the anxious partner's radar reads withdrawal as abandonment. Her childhood taught her that love can disappear without warning, so she fights for it relentlessly. She interprets silence as rejection, space as danger, and "I need time" as "I don't love you." Put those two together and you get chaos disguised as chemistry. She accelerates, he brakes. She clings, he retreats. She chases, he vanishes. And each tells their friends a wildly different story. She said she wanted connection, but she won't stop texting. He said he wants love, but he keeps running. Neither is lying. They're both reenacting their early programming. Avoidants crave connection too. They just need to feel safe first. But their idea of safety is space. Anxious partners crave safety too, but their idea of safety is closeness. So when the anxious leans in, the avoidance alarms go off. When the avoidant pulls back, the anxious alarms go off. It's the perfect cycle of self-fulfilling fear. Her fear of being abandoned makes him feel smothered. His fear of being controlled makes her feel abandoned. This loop doesn't start in adulthood. It starts in nurseries, in childhood homes where comfort was inconsistent or love was conditional. These nervous systems grew up calibrating for danger rather than peace, for vigilance rather than ease. Now they're adults, calling that vigilance love. The first rupture comes early, a simple weekend of silence. He needs downtime, forgets to check his phone. She spirals. She rereads old messages like tarot cards. She remembers his tone, his word choice, his emojis. She decides it's ending. Heartbreak brews before the breakup even exists. He comes back, casual. "Hey, sorry, busy couple days." Relief floods her like morphine. The emotional roller coaster begins its next loop. Avoidant anxious relationships feed each other's drama like oxygen to a flame. The highs are euphoric because the lows are devastating. That's what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the same pattern that keeps gamblers glued to slot machines. One jackpot text can erase days of silence. The brain doesn't care about stability, it chases reward spikes. They both say, "We just can't stay away from each other," but really, they can't stay away from the dopamine. At the core of this dynamic sits one terrifying truth. They're not addicted to each other. They're addicted to anxiety relief. The anxious partner feels relief when connection is restored. The avoidant partner feels relief when distance is restored. Both think they're chasing love, they're chasing equilibrium. But peace isn't found in the chase, it's found in regulation, and that's the skill neither ever learned. After the early spark fades, the balance between them turns into a seesaw with no middle ground. When she feels distance, she rushes forward, calls twice, sends long texts, over-explains every feeling. When he feels pressure, he disappears behind work, hobbies, silence. Each time she reaches, he withdraws a little farther. Each time he withdraws, she panics a little more. Two nervous systems locked in choreography. Approach, retreat, chase, vanish. She thinks, if I can just show him how much I care, he'll relax. He thinks, if she can just calm down, I'll feel safe again. They're both sincere, and both accidentally proving each other's worst story true. Avoidant lovers tell themselves they just prefer independent partners. What they mean is, I feel safer with distance. Anxious lovers tell themselves they just have big hearts. What they mean is, I fear being too much, yet not enough. Every message, every silence is proof. She interprets space as rejection. He interprets emotion as suffocation. I once counseled a couple who described it perfectly. She keeps resurrecting arguments, he said. He keeps deleting me, she replied. In truth, she was trying to repair, he was trying to recover. Her panic said, fix it now. His fear said, run before it explodes. The irony? They both crave the same thing, peace. But peace feels dangerous to both of them. To the anxious, calm feels like distance. To the avoidant, calm feels like exposure. So when things start feeling steady, one of them unconsciously disrupts it, sends a testing text, picks a fight, withdraws, to recreate familiar chaos, because the body trusts what it knows. The anxious lover spends hours analyzing tone shifts, emoji usage, punctuation. Why did he say sure instead of course? The avoidant spends those same hours rehearsing justifications. She's overreacting again. I knew this would be drama. Both nervous systems are screaming. Both egos think they're the calm one. When avoidants finally surface, days, sometimes weeks later, the anxious partner is already prepared for the worst. Her messages have transformed from curiosity to accusation. His replies from calm to defense. They end up arguing not about love, but about how to love. The anxious person demands reassurance with urgency. The avoidant perceives threat behind that urgency. The anxious person chases safety. The avoidant chases solitude. Attraction chemistry amplifies the pattern. Avoidants often choose partners who overexpress because it allows them to stay detached. Anxious partners choose those who underexpress because it recreates the inconsistency they grew up with. Familiarity feels like destiny. One client told me about her ex who vanished for days. He said, I just needed space, but every time I protested, he disappeared longer next time. I asked, and why did you stay? She paused, because every return felt like proof he cared. That's the cruel trick. Each reunion releases enough dopamine to justify the pain. It creates a cycle of craving, not love, but relief from withdrawal. The avoidant often believes they are the rational one. They value logic, composure, restraint. But their calm isn't regulation, it's suppression. They crave connection, but only up to the point where vulnerability would expose their fear. As soon as someone gets close enough to touch the wound, they retreat. I just need time to think. Translation,
I just touched a feeling I don't know how to manage. The anxious partner, meanwhile, reads suppression as rejection. They use intensity as a bridge, talk louder, love harder, overshare sooner. That bridge collapses every time. Here's the hard truth most people don't want to face. Anxious avoidant relationships often feel passionate because they are unstable. The instability keeps both nervous systems in high alert, mistaking adrenaline for connection. When a moment of peace finally arrives, it feels empty because their bodies have become addicted to emotional volatility. Picture it like a swing. The anxious pushes forward for closeness. The avoidant pulls back for safety. The motion between them feels alive, but it's powered by fear, not affection. Deep down, both have the same thought. If I lose this person, it means I was unlovable all along. That hidden belief holds them hostage long after the relationship turns toxic. Avoidants will reminisce about exes for years, idealizing them because distance makes nostalgia safe. Anxious lovers will hold on to exes through friendship, hoping for scraps of connection. Both call it unfinished business. It's actually unresolved trauma. When avoidants fall for anxious partners, they meet the one person who can outpace their retreat. When anxious lovers fall for avoidance, they meet the one person who can outdistance their chase. The result is emotional stalemate, love frozen between two conflicting survival codes. But there's a way out. It doesn't start with finding a new partner. It starts with finding regulation. Learning to pause before reacting. Learning that space isn't rejection.
To understand why avoidance and anxious lovers magnetize and then tear at each other, you must trace the blueprint back to its original architect, childhood. Most people think attachment theory is soft psychology. It isn't. It's wiring. It's a nervous system survival algorithm written before you even knew what love meant. The anxious child grew up in emotional hot and cold weather. Some days the house shone with warmth, praise, laughter, cuddles. Then suddenly a freeze. A distracted parent, a slammed door, a smile withheld. They learned quickly, love can vanish without warning. So they became hyper-vigilant, reading every mood shift like radar. If mom frowned, they ran to fix it. If dad fell silent, they performed. Every success gave a flash of affection. Every mistake withdrew it. Their hearts learned to race at the slightest hint of distance, because distance once meant danger. The avoidant child's environment was different. Quiet, organized, but emotionally hollow. Maybe their parents were providers, not nurturers. Maybe feelings were labeled drama. Tears met with go to your room. They survived by self-soothing. They learned to excel alone, comfort themselves with control. The message was clear. Dependence equals disappointment. So they trained themselves never to need. Fast forward to adulthood. The anxious adult clings at the first hint of affection. They've been waiting decades for someone who stays. The avoidant flinches, because staying now feels like a cage. One searches for closeness as safety, the other searches for space as freedom. And when life throws them together, nature handles the introductions. Spark, allure, recognition. One says, "You feel like home." The other nods, not realizing that home was the very place their coping mechanisms were born. They fall in love. But what they're really falling into is the echo of childhood repeating itself. You can see it in tiny moments. The anxious lover hears a sigh and assumes rejection. The avoidant hears a tone and assumes accusation. Each is 5 years old again, trying to earn validation or avoid punishment. It's not an adult relationship. It's two inner children fighting for the care they missed.
A woman once told me, every boyfriend eventually says I feel too much. I asked, when did you first hear that you were too much? She said, when I was 7, crying after my parents fought. There it was, a 30-year-old body housing a 7-year-old ache. Avoidant clients tell a mirrored story. A man once said, I can't stand when someone demands instant replies. I asked, did anyone ever wait for you when you were upset? He blinked. No, I learned early that no one comes to help me. So, of course, intimacy now feels like intrusion. When these two meet, they trigger each other's ghosts perfectly. The anxious partner's pursuit mirrors the caregiver who is inconsistent, always available, then gone. The avoidance withdrawal mirrors the unresponsive caregiver, present physically, absent emotionally. That pairing feels fated because it's familiar. This is why therapy often sounds repetitive. You're not just grieving a partner, you're grieving the promise that maybe this time childhood would rewrite itself. It never does. You cannot reparent yourself through baiting someone with the same emotional wounds. In their arguments, listen to the subtext. Anxious, why won't you talk to me? Avoidant, why won't you ever stop talking? Translated, please prove that love doesn't vanish, and please prove that love won't consume me. Even their apologies clash. The anxious says, I'm sorry for pushing. The avoidant says, I'm sorry for disappearing. Neither realizes they're both apologizing for their survival strategies. Healing this loop starts where it began, with awareness of what your body calls love. If your pulse spikes when someone withdraws, that's not passion. That's panic responding to an old script. If relief floods you only when your partner reappears, that's not chemistry. That's your nervous system celebrating temporary safety. If solitude feels like doom, that's not attachment. That's unresolved fear of abandonment. And if closeness feels like suffocation, that's not independence. That's unresolved fear of engulfment. The anxious partner must learn to pause between feeling and reacting, to make space for self-soothing. The avoidant partner must learn to stay through discomfort, to understand that vulnerability is not equal to danger. Neither job is easy. Doing what love actually requires means betraying the defenses that once kept you alive. Without that awareness, both partners will keep using each other as emotional laboratories, testing old hypotheses. Will someone finally love me if I stay loud enough? Will someone finally not trap me if I open up just a bit? The result is predictable, heartbreak disguised as learning. Once they see the pattern, really see it, it hurts. Realization always precedes relief. But pain here is data. It means the system is conscious, no longer automatic. Anxious lovers begin to recognize their chase not as courage, but compulsion. Avoidants start to see withdrawal not as protection, but paralysis. Adult intimacy begins right there, when both admit their childhood code of love is due for an upgrade.
If you've ever watched an anxious avoidant couple click in those first few weeks, you'd swear they were soulmates. The connection feels magnetic, finishing sentences, staying up until 3 a.m., confessing childhood memories on night 1. They marvel, I've never opened up like this before. That opening is real, but also dangerous. It's vulnerability without regulation, two storms colliding, mistaking lightning for light. People often confuse familiarity with fate. When an avoidant feels strangely calm around an anxious partner, it isn't serenity. It's suppression meeting expression. The anxious one creates motion. The avoidant hides in that motion, both mistaking the relief of recognition for love. In the beginning, it's perfect because the anxious partner supplies the initiative the avoidant lacks. She plans the dates, keeps conversation flowing, guesses needs before he articulates them. He feels cared for without having to ask, a dream for someone who finds asking humiliating. Meanwhile, she feels wanted, chosen. His initial intrigue feels like devotion. For both, it's intoxicating. But human chemistry has a cruel twist. The same cues that make us feel alive at first will exhaust us later. That adrenaline of uncertainty, the butterflies born from unpredictability, the thrill of the chase, all byproducts of low-grade anxiety. Once private lives stabilize, that energy turns corrosive. Soon he interprets her enthusiasm as pressure. She interprets his calm as apathy. She doubles communication, he halves it. Her voice shakes when she says, "I just need to know where we stand." He stiffens, thinks, "We were fine until you brought this up." Cue tension, confusion, distance. And yet, both keep returning. Why? Because withdrawal from emotional chaos feels like detox. After the breakup, both enter an eerie calm, then crave the very volatility they swore they'd escape. Their bodies confuse peace with boredom. Within days, one sends a tentative message. "Hey, been thinking about you." Addiction resumes. You can trace its neurochemistry clearly. The anxious brain releases cortisol at any hint of separation. When contact resumes, a dopamine surge follows, reinforcing the chase. The avoidant brain releases cortisol when closeness feels too intense, and dopamine once they regain distance. Both systems celebrate relief rather than connection. That's what makes these pairings so destructive. They run on mirrored addictions. The anxious is addicted to pursuit, the avoidant addicted to escape. Their highs and lows sync perfectly. After a fight, make-up moments feel holy because adrenaline masquerades as affection. Physical intimacy especially becomes a peace treaty, a temporary ceasefire that teaches both the wrong lesson. See, this must be real. Meanwhile, outsiders see instability and call it passion. Social media even glorifies it, the toxic "but I love him" memes, the roller coaster romances made cinematic. No wonder so many mistake chemistry for compatibility. Real compatibility is predictable, anxiety is cinematic. But adrenaline doesn't build future, it builds fatigue. Listen long enough to their self-descriptions and you'll catch the illusion cracking. "She just gets me, we're both so intense." Translation: we soothe each other's wounds until the wounds start bleeding again. "He's so calm, it balances me." Translation: he triggers my insecurity just enough to feel like home. They don't realize home isn't supposed to hurt. For the anxious, heartbreak feels familiar. For the avoidant, guilt does. So each mistake normalizes the next. When you ask anxious lovers why they stay, their answers sound noble. "Because I see his potential." Because deep down he's scared, like me. But love that depends on rescuing is not intimacy. It's repetition compulsion. Avoidants stay for similar reasons, masked in pragmatism. "She's emotional, but at least she cares." "He's messy, but he teaches me patience." Translation: I'm proving I can control chaos by staying near it. So when reality cracks open, when one finally reaches breaking point, it isn't random collapse, it's overdue revelation. The anxious one eventually screams some version of, "You never show up for us." The avoidant one fires back, "You'll never be satisfied." Both believe it's a compatibility problem. It isn't. It's an unhealed pattern claiming realism. The tragedy is this tension can last for years. They break up repeatedly, swear it's final, yet orbit each other through birthdays, texts, accidental run-ins. They build rituals around relapse. It looks romantic from afar. We always find our way back. In truth, they never left the original argument, they've just renamed it. Healing begins the moment one stops confusing drama for depth. When calm finally feels safe instead of dull. When peace stops reading as apathy. That's when attachment chemistry burns off and real choice begins. But to reach that stage, something in both of them has to fracture. An ego death, quiet and merciless. They must admit the comfort they chase is the cage they built.
The longer an anxious avoidant pair stays locked together, the more their relationship becomes a contest of emotional strategy rather than shared intimacy. It's not malicious, it's survival. Each person begins to craft micro-tactics to get their needs met without triggering the other's fear. She says, "I'll stop texting first." She tells herself it's self-respect, but underneath it's a test. Will he notice the silence? He says, "I'll make more effort." He tells himself it's compromise, but underneath it's fear management. If I appear engaged, she won't demand more than I can give. Both think they're taking control. Both are still ruled by the anxiety of loss. The anxious partner's control mechanism is pursuit through care, sending memes, checking schedules, over-explaining every feeling. It looks like attentiveness, feels like love, but to the avoidance body, it signals danger. The avoidance control mechanism is absence through logic, subtle emotional withdrawal hidden behind explanations like, "I just process differently," or "let's not overthink it." It looks like rationality, feels like structure, but to the anxious body, it signals rejection. Neither knows they're touching ancient wounds. Soon sarcasm replaces honesty. He calls her dramatic, she calls him distant. Every conversation becomes a coded plea. "I'm terrified you'll leave," translated as accusation. "I'm terrified I'll suffocate," disguised as defensiveness. The power struggle is quieter than shouting. It's the silence between replies, the sigh before speaking. Their love becomes a chessboard. She plays white, striking first with vulnerability. He plays black, responding with strategy. To spectators, they look mismatched. To them, this dance is destiny. But destiny has a bill. Eventually, exhaustion outweighs chemistry. The anxious partner begins muting her own needs, editing texts, pretending she's fine when she isn't, learning that honesty often triggers retreat. That self-censorship masquerades as maturity, but erodes self-esteem. Quietly, she becomes another version of the avoidant, detached for safety. The avoidant partner isn't winning either. Their constant vigilance, guarding independence, anticipating demands, turns into chronic isolation. They start missing the very warmth they're guarding against. They scroll through old photos, half tempted to text, half terrified of the follow-up conversation. Each solitude morphs into phantom loneliness. Here's where the tragic symmetry peaks. The anxious is dying from too much closeness, never rewarded. The avoidant from too much distance, never relieved. Both will tell friends, "We tried everything," but what they really tried was control without vulnerability. A man I worked with once said, "Every time she cried, I shut down." I asked, "What did her tears remind you of?" After a pause, "My mother's lectures, when she'd corner me until I agreed just to end it." There it was, the body memory confusing emotion with entrapment. Another client, a woman, told me, "I stopped talking about feelings because he'd go cold. I thought less emotion equals more security, but he just withdrew further." When love becomes strategy, authenticity dies quietly. You can win small battles, fewer arguments, longer intervals of peace, polite texts, but the cost is intimacy itself. And yet, when they finally break it off, grief floods both sides with equal force. The anxious mourns the hope that closeness would heal. The avoidant mourns the guilt that distance saved no one. Both replay every moment, mining for validation that their coping made sense. What they're grieving isn't just each other, it's the illusion that this partner would fix their origin story. The cycle rarely ends with a dramatic final scene. It ends with quiet recognition. The anxious stops explaining, the avoidant stops promising, silence becomes confession. We kept each other's fears alive longer than necessary. This point of collapse is also the first door to growth, because when control stops working, awareness begins. The anxious realizes that chasing love never secures it. The avoidant realizes that avoiding love never preserves freedom. That's where therapy, reflection, and genuine emotional education enter. It's the unglamorous work, the reverse engineering of reflexes built in childhood, the slow exposure therapy of intimacy. The anxious learns that reassurance cannot replace self-regulation. The avoidant learns that solitude is not the same as peace. It is uncomfortable work. Imagine teaching your body a new vocabulary. Stillness is safe. Closeness is not confinement. absence is not abandonment. Each phrase fought by old reflexes, but with practice, a subtle shift occurs. Conflict loses drama, connection gains quiet strength. The wounded pattern begins to fade. When avoidant and anxious individuals grow 3 degrees healthier, they stop orbiting each other and start orbiting truth. Sometimes that truth keeps them together with new boundaries. More often, it gently parts them. They can finally love without reenacting the past. They look back and see love had never been war. It only felt that way because fear commanded the troops.
When the dust settles, when the last argument has been replayed until meaning erodes, something quieter arrives. The reckoning. Both the anxious and the avoidant finally stand face to face, not with each other, but with themselves. Healing doesn't start with logic, it starts with regulation. You have to teach the body what safety feels like before the mind can believe it. For the anxious, that means learning to calm without contact. For the avoidant, it means staying present without panic. Every deep breath is rebellion. Every paused impulse is revolution. The anxious partner's homework sounds deceptively simple. When silence hits, notice the urge to reach out. Name the feeling under it. Fear, sadness, shame. Breathe, move. Wait until the body settles before acting. At first, it feels impossible, like drowning without swimming. But a pattern loses power every time it's observed without obedience. Avoidant healing looks equally foreign. When closeness stirs discomfort, don't escape immediately. Scan for the threat. Is it real or just remembered? Stay long enough to let the body learn it's safe. They discover space can exist inside connection. They don't have to buy it by leaving. At this stage, therapy helps translate abstract advice into muscle memory. Grounding exercises, journaling triggers, rewriting inner dialogue. The anxious voice learns to whisper instead of shout. The avoidant silence learns to speak in full sentences. Gradually, they start practicing with others, friends, coworkers, small doses of intimacy. The anxious one experiments with delayed replies, noticing that genuine people don't vanish. The avoidant experiments with actual vulnerability, realizing that honest connection doesn't erase autonomy. Tiny victories, barely visible to anyone else, yet seismic internally. Modern culture rarely celebrates this work. We romanticize trauma, not its repair. We post the messy stories, not the calm mornings. But this hidden stage decides everything. The goal isn't to become perfectly secure overnight. It's to become conscious. Conscious people still feel fear. They just stop handing it the keys. As they heal, attraction recalibrates. The anxious, once drawn to emotional absences, now feels magnetism toward consistency. The avoidant, once thrilled by intensity, now longs for steadiness. The nervous system, once addicted to volatility, starts craving neutrality, the quiet hum of mutual safety. And when they meet again, perhaps months, perhaps years later, they barely recognize themselves. The anxious lover no longer texts novels. She asks clear questions, accepts clear answers. Silence no longer pricks like rejection. It just means someone is busy. The avoidant lover no longer dodges eye contact. He talks through discomfort instead of vanishing into it. Space no longer tastes like relief. It tastes like loneliness he's finally ready to end. Maybe they reconnect. Maybe they move on. It doesn't matter. What matters is that each finally embodies what they chased: stability. Let's zoom out. Entire generations are replaying this dance on dating apps and social media, confusing attachment wounds for preference. Swipe cultures exacerbate avoidance. Constant validation fuels anxiety. One side brags about no drama, another about ride or die passion. Neither knows they're describing fear management, not love. We scroll past calm people because calm doesn't spike dopamine. We confuse emotional availability with weakness, stoicism with strength. The algorithm rewards reactivity. The psyche pays the bill. Healing requires defying that economy. It means valuing boring constancy over fireworks, thoughtful silence over performative attention. It means finding partners who regulate you, not adrenaline. Picture what a relationship could look like once both patterns evolve. She feels a pang of panic when he's quiet, but instead of accusation, she asks, "Are you taking space or pulling away?" He feels pressure when she gets emotional, but instead of retreating, he says, "I need a second, but I'm still here." No guessing, no games, just communication between two people who've made their needs legible. That's attachment security in practice. Not perfection, not perpetual harmony, but mutual honesty under stress. The anxious learns love that must be chased isn't love. The avoidant learns love that must be avoided isn't safety. Both finally understand that boundaries and closeness aren't opposites, they're architecture. From there, intimacy stops consuming and starts constructing. The next time they stand before someone new, their sensors still twitch, old fears still whisper, but experience answers back. We've survived our own biology. We can handle connection. And that is the quiet miracle. The nervous system once built for war, remembering peace. When avoidants fall for anxious lovers after healing, the story changes completely. The avoidant says, "I need space," and the anxious replies, "Take it, I trust you." The anxious says, "I need reassurance," and the avoidant answers, "Of course." No panic, no retreat, just human beings finally safe enough to love and be loved. That's what this whole messy pattern was trying to teach from the beginning.